Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today. I'm Jamie, that's Dave, that's Heath. We got the starts that you need for Week 15. Remember, start of the fantasy playoffs. You want to make sure your lineups are right, and we have the players that we think are going to perform hopefully a little bit better than the expectations in their matchups for this week. And we'll start with where we always do, the start of the week. And this running back has been absolutely fantastic of late for the Kansas City Chiefs. Isaiah Pacheco taking on the Texans. The matchup is fantastic. They allow the most fantasy points to opposing running backs. There have been 10 running backs on the season to score at least 14 PPR points against the Texans. They allow the most touchdowns, total touchdowns, to opposing running backs with 18. And Pacheco in his last 4 games, 90 total yards or a touchdown in each of those games. His last 2 games, he's been fantastic from a fantasy perspective. He's getting more involved in the passing game, 5 catches over the last 2 weeks. And hopefully this is the week where he just absolutely crushes that Sportsline project 29th. Get out of here, Sportsline. He's going to be a top 15 running back, if not better. So, Dave, you're the low guy this week. What's your concern about Pacheco?
The concern is that Jerick McKinnon does siphon away a decent amount of work. He plays in a lot of the high-value situations that we want our fantasy running backs to play in. He's in on passing downs. He plays more near the goal line. And it's a little nerve-wracking when you put your eggs in the Pacheco basket, but I agree he is a good number 2 fantasy running back. And what are the chances? All right, picture this. Texans getting crushed. It's the middle of the third quarter. Are the Chiefs going to put Jerick McKinnon, who's been in the league for a dozen years out there, or are they going to put Pacheco?
I hope it's not Ronald Jones.
I hope it's not Ronald Jones
That's
either.
what I hope.
Pacheco, I think that might be his best path to finish as a top 12 running back this week, is that he gets that time to grind down the clock against the lowly Texans.
Heath, what do you think about Pacheco this week?
I think he's got an opportunity for 20 carries, over 100 yards, and get into the end zone at least once. I mean, the McKinnon stuff is a little bit worrisome, but I just don't think this is a Jerick McKinnon game. They use Jerick McKinnon when they need him for the most part. When they're in trouble, definitely. Not in a game like this one. Now, if Houston comes out and grabs a lead like they did against the Cowboys, then I think it turns into a Jerick McKinnon game. Nobody thinks that's going to happen.
Yep, hopefully that will not be the case, but they did surprise us last week, the Texans did, in how they competed with the Dallas Cowboys. All right, other starts for me for this week. Got Kirk Cousins at quarterback, taking on the Indianapolis Colts. Hopefully that'll be a big game for him. Zay Jones and Terry McLaurin at wide receiver, David Montgomery at running back, and Chigo Okonkwo. I don't even care if Traylon Burks plays. I'm still going to trust Okonkwo because I think the Titans are going to be chasing points, and they will need him in that matchup. But let's talk about Cousins taking on the Colts. He was unbelievable last week, as we expected, against Detroit. 425 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's got at least 27 fantasy points in 2 of his last 3 games. And he's now facing the Colts team that's allowed 3 of their past 4 opposing quarterbacks to score at least 21 points. So hopefully he's a little bit better than that, but like the setup for Cousins in this matchup. Let's talk a little bit more about Zay Jones, though. Get a little bit more into that conversation, because the matchup is very, very difficult for the Jaguars taking on a good Cowboys pass defense. Dave, can Zay Jones, who's got 41 targets in his last 4 games, who's been great in 3 of the last 4, can he keep it going one more time? Do you trust the player, or do you get a little bit nervous about the matchup?
I get queasy about the matchup because you just think about how outside receivers do against the Dallas Cowboys, and I get nervous just thinking about Trayvon Diggs lining up across from Zay Jones. It's not going to be Christian Kirk. Kirk lines up in the slot. Diggs stays out wide. And it's not like he plays man-to-man against him. They play a lot of zone defense too, and I think that hurts Zay Jones. You're going to need him to come through and not drop any passes, not bobble anything. Dropped a huge touchdown last week. Got lucky with the touchdown that he did get. I think he's a number 3 receiver at best.
This secondary, they'll fall apart a little bit. And so the thing that I like about it is we saw it the first game that he had this stretch against Baltimore. Absolutely crushed a very good secondary, and I think he's going to do the same thing because Trevor Lawrence is probably throwing the ball 50 times in this game as they're chasing points.
If he throws the ball 50 times, Zay Jones will be fine.
It's banking on the targets. It's banking on the fact that he's hot right now, so that's why I would trust him despite the tough matchup. And then in terms of Chigo Okonkwo, kind of the same thing. You're looking at a situation where I think the Titans are chasing points, and he's got 10 or more PPR points the last 2 weeks. No Derwin James, most likely, and we could see Okonkwo come through with another strong performance. So like the setup for him despite the tough matchup, again, against the Chargers. All right, Heath, starts for you. You got a couple of Jets on your list. You got Mike White and Tyler Conklin, J.K. Dobbins, Amari Cooper, and Michael Pittman. Let's talk about the Jets. So Mike White, bad last week, hurt against the Buffalo Bills, but this is one of those dream matchups. The Lions allow the most fantasy points to opposing quarterback.
Absolutely. You got a guy that's averaging 317 yards passing per game, even after the bad game against the Bills last week. He struggled to get into the end zone the last 2 weeks. I don't think that will be a struggle against the Lions. There's a little bit of conflict whether this turns into the high-scoring game the Lions have been playing or the low-scoring games the Jets have been known for. Either way, I think we're going to see Mike White throw the ball 40-plus times, get over 300 yards again. If he gets you 1 touchdown, he'll be a low-end starter. If he gets you 2, he's going to be fantastic. Tyler Conklin has mostly been dependent on the number of pass attempts for the Jets. There's been a couple of games where he's had big targets, like Week 13 against Minnesota, 7 targets, just 2 catches for 9 yards. But for the most part, when they throw the ball a lot, he's a pretty decent starter.
Let's talk about Pittman because we haven't talked about it in a while because the Colts were on a bye last week. And so in this matchup, against the Vikings defense that's been really bad against opposing wide receivers, can Pittman have a big week?
When you know that shell defense that the Vikings play, that exactly, allows lots of stuff underneath. And that's all Matt Ryan can do because he can't throw the ball downfield. So this might be a game where you see 12, 13, 14 targets for Michael Pittman. It might turn into 8 catches for 68 yards. If he gets into the end zone, we're too low on him. He'll be a top 12 wide receiver. I'm ranking him as he's been most of this season, not getting into the end zone, but still being a number 2 wide receiver.
Dave, what's your concern with Pittman?
That he scores, and I'm worried about that. He only has 4 end zone targets on the year. This is a dink and dink offense for the Indianapolis Colts, and they're going to want to be able to run the ball too. But it does set up for him to get a lot of targets and catches. He just isn't efficient with them. So to me, he's a high-end flex.
Here's what I like in terms of the floor for him. There have been 17 receivers with at least 7 targets against Minnesota this year. He has 7 targets at least 9 times this season. 15 of those 17 receivers have gotten at least 13 PPR points. So I think he's going to be right there.
I think that's a great floor for him.
Exactly. And so it's just, I think it'll be a little bit better than that just based on how this matchup will go. And they're probably chasing points as well if the Vikings offense holds up. All right, Dave, the starts for you. You got a couple of Packers on your list, Aaron Rodgers and Christian Watson. You got Brian Robinson and Deontay Foreman at the running back position and Greg Dulcich at the tight end spot. So let's talk about the Packers here because, again, team we haven't talked about in a while because they were on a bye. So Monday Night Football could be some cold weather taking on a Rams defense that certainly looked a lot better last week against the Raiders. Can the connection from Rodgers to Watson be good enough that Rodgers is number 1 quarterback and Watson still a high-end number 2 receiver?
I think Rodgers can bounce back after his past 2 games to be a top 12 quarterback. I think they attacked the Rams downfield. The Rams have given up 6 completions of 20-plus yards, 5.7 yards after catch per reception on pass plays of 15-plus air yards. That's not all passes. That's just deep passes. So they are very, very vulnerable there, and that's what Christian Watson's been doing. He has at least 6 targets in each of his past 4 games. He's had at least 90% of the snaps in each of his past 2. I'm starting Christian Watson for the upside, and I'm not too worried about the downside for him because he's so involved in the offense. And if he's going to go off, then you got to like Aaron Rodgers' chances to connect as well. I think Rodgers can get you over 20 fantasy points.
Does Romeo Doubs playing scare you at all for Watson?
No.
I'm just saying because,
not even a little bit. It might scare me more for Lazard at this point.
We haven't seen those 2 guys play at the same time and connect with Aaron Rodgers at the same time.
I think it's pretty clear that Watson's the best receiver right now.
I would agree. I just wonder, there's a couple more targets going a different direction because, a player who was successful for them early in the season. Heath, obviously we saw your rankings not as high on Aaron Rodgers. What's your concern?
Well, I don't think it's bounced back from the last 2 games. It's bounced back from the entire season for Aaron Rodgers. He has 1 game all season long with more than 255 passing yards. The last time we saw him was against the Chicago Bears, a defense that can't stop anyone doing anything, and he threw for 182 yards on 31 pass attempts. Aaron Rodgers just has not been very good this year.
I do like the fact that he's at home. His last 2 games at home, 23 fantasy points, 24 fantasy points, and so I think that could certainly help him just being back in the friendly confines of Lambeau Field. We don't know how many more games he's going to play at Lambeau Field, so a primetime game I think Aaron Rodgers does deliver here. Talking about the 2 running backs, and not necessarily because they're starts, because I agree with you, I think Robinson and Foreman are good starts. Are they good starts in PPR, though, because these guys are not going to necessarily catch the ball?
Robinson actually has 2 catches in each of his past 2 games, so they're using him a little bit more. It's not exactly Austin Eckler that we're talking about, but he's maybe 1 or 2 catches behind Antonio Gibson at this point, and I love the matchup just overall and the workload overall. Jamie, he's averaging 20 carries in each of his past 4 games. So I think that he's going to have a huge opportunity against a Giants defense that stinks. The Commanders' offensive line, getting healthy, could be the best it's been all season long. So I'm riding with Brian Robinson. And Foreman didn't score last week. He had 3 opportunities to. That's the difference between him having a not-so-great fantasy game and a very good fantasy game. This Steelers defense got gashed by the Ravens. I don't think they'll be able to recover. Carolina's offensive line's been playing well, too. So Foreman's a number 2 running back for me.
Heath, when you look at Foreman and Chuba Hubbard, how do you think the split goes this week?
I just hope it doesn't get any closer. That would be the problem for Deontay Foreman. If it stays the same as it was last week and they're able to continue running the ball 35 or 40 times, then I think that's okay for Foreman to be a low-end number 2 and Hubbard to be a high-end flex. I do think there's a little bit of risk for Foreman, as well as Hubbard ran last week, that we see even more work going Hubbard's way, because we all thought when this all first went down that Hubbard would be the 1A, Foreman would be the 1B. Foreman took the job almost entirely, and now it's creeping back towards to where we were at the beginning.
Yep, could be an even split. split, but I do think Foreman is the better of the two for this matchup. Maybe a little bit closer in PPR than non-PPR, but hopefully Foreman can continue to be productive and, again, find the end zone this week.